Hello, everyone. This is part 2 of week 8 of Plato, a class on the Protagoras, Phaedo, and Sophist, and we continue to talk about the Phaedo. The final argument for the immortality of the soul works with the idea that the soul is inherently alive. If it is inherently alive, it is immortal. That is the core of the intuition. In order to defend this idea, Plato develops a distinction between types of properties. And I want to suggest that even if we are maybe in the end not persuaded by the argument for the immortality of the soul, the distinction between types of properties that he's putting forward is interesting. So what is this distinction? On the one hand, the claim is there are contingent and relative properties. On the other hand, there are necessary and inherent properties, or inherent here stands in for what something is by nature. Here are the examples that Socrates uses. Simmias, one of our interlocutors, is tall as compared to Socrates. So that is the way in which being tall is relative, because someone is tall as compared to one comparandum, and he is small compared to Phaedo. So he happens to be, that is the contingency, he happens to be tall as compared to one person and small as compared to another person. Now, here's how Socrates describes what's going on, as it were, when we change the context, when we change the comparanda. The thought is, as it were, Simmias and Socrates. Now we kind of take Socrates out of the picture and we put Phaedo into the picture, and the property tall that Simmias has compared to Socrates goes away. So the claim is tall goes away, and compared to Phaedo, Simmias is small. Now let's look at the other type of property, which is necessary and by nature or inherent. One example here is snow is cold. That is by nature, and it is also necessary. Something isn't cold, it isn't snow. Another example is 3 is odd. 3 is necessarily odd. And it is just the nature of 3 to be odd. Now, sometimes in the secondary literature, people put this in terms of eccentric properties. And I want to kind of caution against this a little bit and suggest that we do not use that vocabulary, because it easily suggests an Aristotelian distinction between the essential and the accidental. And that is not Plato's distinction here. The distinction here is between what is necessarily and by nature the case and what is contingently and relatively the case. And I think we should sort of pay attention to the specifics of that distinction. Now, when we look at these instances of necessary and inherent properties, and we ask kind of what happens with a kind of context change, as the context change that we had when we kind of took Socrates out of the picture, put Phaedo into the picture, and we said that tall went away, and now Simmias is small as compared to Phaedo. In the case of snow, say you have snow, it's cold, and fire comes along, we have the kind of context change. It just is not the case that the snow as it were remains, but changes its property. It is not the case that cold goes away. Rather, the cold snow goes away. And the proposal is that that is how it is with the soul. The soul is inherently, necessarily, by nature alive. That is just what being a soul is. So death comes along, as it were, analogously to how fire comes along. When we look at the case of the snow, death comes along, and it is not the case that being alive, the property being alive, goes away. Rather, the soul goes away, but it keeps its property alive. So this is a way in which we can think about immortality. When death comes along, the soul leaves the body, but it keeps its necessary and inherent property being alive. And I would like to, as I just invite you to kind of puzzle about this. The argument in the Phaedo is extraordinarily contested. Interpreters have taken issue with every step along the way. But whether or not we ultimately buy into it, I would like to sort of suggest that the takeaway that there is a genuine distinction between necessary properties that are inherent and contingent properties that are relative, that distinction is compelling.